The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball here on News Talk. John Duggan sitting in for Joe Malloy today until 7. Time now for the Sunday Papers. We're delighted to be joined by the Virgin Media commentator Dave McIntyre and the broadcaster and accredited sports psychologist Máire Treasa. Dave and Máire Treasa, how are we today?
Great,
John,
how are you?
Hi, MT.
Hi, Dave.
I hope you're well. You can listen to us on News Talk, and you can watch us on the digital and social channels, our live streams as well, for Periscope on Twitter, at Off the Ball, YouTube, Facebook, and on the OTB Sports app. Search OTB Sports in your app store now to download the app if you haven't already. Looking forward to the chat, folks, between now and 3 o'clock on the Sunday Papers, the review of the best writing of your Sunday. Let's go through the back pages. Front of the broadsheets. Jim Bulger, Part 2. So this is standing his ground. Paul Kimmage and Jim Bulger, the Wexford horse racing trainer. If it's not done, it's going to get worse. And if it gets worse, the game would be up. And the other headline on the back or the front page of the broadsheet: Spurs set to block Kane's dream move. So Manchester City, Man United, I'm sure they'd be all interested in Harry Kane, but Daniel Levy has the fact that he has that contract, that 6-year contract, and Harry Kane is going nowhere, according to the front of the main section of the Sunday Independent Sport. We got the Sunday Times as well, with a picture of Ronaldo after Portugal's defeat. Heads you lose is the front page headline there of the Sunday Times, about Germany beating Portugal 4-2. Ronaldo and Portugal on the ropes. Who can stop the Dubs? A preview of the Football Championship, which is kind of crept up. It's going to happen from next weekend. Graham Souness, Wayne Rooney, Peter Schmeichel, all writing in the Sunday Times. We're going to get to that in a moment. Going to go through the Observer here. Champions Mullard, and Thomas Muller in that typical pose of his in the Observer. The front page: Germany to the fore as 2 own goals leave Ronaldo's holders third in their group, with France up next. So really pretty much all about the Euros in the Observer. The back page of the Sun, writing us off was a big Joach. We knew we could have done better, and we knew we could do better. Portugal 2, Germany 4. Heart of Dragons about Wales playing Italy today at the Euros. And it's Derry well done after Derry's win in the NFL Division 3 final. 1-6 for Offaly, 21 points for Derry, and Chrissy McCaig lifting the trophy at Croke Park yesterday. That's the back of the Sun. Back of the Daily Mail, Wunderbar. It's about Germany again. Thomas Muller: Germany roar back to form, send out warning to your rivals. Their win over the defending champions. Whither now England? Southgate has big calls to make as Euro title ambitions take serious dent. That is at the back of the Mail. A new Leaf Derry cruise past Offaly and laid down a marker for the summer. Plus Walsh, this is Miriam Walsh, ready for that camogie final as Cats eye up final glory. 7:30 against Galway tonight at Croke Park. That is the back of the Mail. Back of the Sunday World, That Man and Robin. So this is about Robin Gosens, who was the man of the match yesterday for Germany against Portugal. It's gloom for Ronaldo, but pure joy for Gosens and Germany. And Pogba's Paul done at United. That's about Paul Pogba. Is this just tabloid speculation and fodder for your summer, or is it actually a bit of truth, a ring of truth to it? We haven't had any Sancho headlines yet at the back pages. I've yet to get through the whole lot of them. We still have a golden chance as Harry Kane. Reality check, obviously, for England. He's had a poor start to the Euros. What is the reason for that? We'll tease that out now over the next hour and a half. And OT fear Paul will pog off. Exclusive fears are growing that Man United, in the back of the Star, that Paul Pogba will run down his contract and walk out of Old Trafford for nothing next year. And it is coming home, says Harry Kane, defying Kane his back, and says we can win the Euros. He's told the nation, this is England, obviously this is back at the Sunday Mirror, that England can win the European Championship. Pog free deal, fear for United. And Bale has Wembley way on his mind, with Wales playing Italy, as I said, at 5 o'clock. Just on the back pages, Dave, Paul Pogba, Harry Kane, nothing really new there, is there?
No, there isn't. There has been some talk that if there is a deal to be done for Harry Kane, that Daniel Levy's going to perform his usual negotiation hard man tactics as he has in the past, and very successfully when it comes to the money that he's ultimately been able to bring into Tottenham when he's lost some of his bigger players. Bale obviously been the best example of that. And there are some clubs, I'd say, that would rather not have to negotiate with Daniel Levy well into the summer at all. So that's definitely going to be a factor as to whether or not Kane will be able to get that move, particularly with City, who I think who would like to have their business done earlier in the summer than have to wait for the new season to start. And I think, do City face Tottenham very early in the season?
The first weekend. It's the first weekend, the first game.
Yes, so they would if Harry Kane's going to be a City player, they want him to be wearing the City shirt that day, and Daniel Levy certainly would not want that to be the case, particularly if Man City were to beat Tottenham the opening day of the season. I think Harry Kane's in a tough spot. There's a whole number of factors. His form isn't great. There are very few clubs, maybe 2 or 3 max, that have the financial wherewithal to be able to pay Tottenham what they're going to look for him. And my guess right now, if I was to roll the dice, would be that he will be playing for Tottenham next season, whether he likes it or not.
I wonder, Máire Treasa, is it affecting him?
I don't know. I suppose it depends how good he is at parking things before he goes in between those white lines. But I'd say it's definitely going to affect him financially, just picking up on what Dave was saying there. Or it's going to affect Tottenham financially at some point, because his stock is going down with each bad performance, which is really unfair on him, because he's been, I feel like, because Harry Kane hasn't performed at these Euros, and a lot of, some of it is his fault, but not all of it. I know we'll be discussing some of the writing a bit later. But I think the longer this gets more dragged out and protracted, just kind of the shine goes off him a little bit. It's like that dress you want for a long time, and it's you're waiting for it to arrive in the window, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and eventually it shows up in the window, and the shop assistant's like, no, I don't know, and all of a sudden the dress becomes last season's. Do you know what I mean? And I would be worried for him from that point of view alone. His pocket, I think, if it goes on, if it gets dragged on, and like if, as Dave predicts, if he's playing in a Tottenham jersey instead of a City jersey come the next few weeks and months, it's not going to end well for him financially. Psychologically, is it affecting his play? Who knows? I don't know the man. You would imagine, though, that something like that, I do sometimes wonder, like, when you're that rich, and I don't think we can fathom the amount of money these footballers make. Like, we know the numbers, but I don't know if we actually understand it. And how important is, money and things. For him, it's more to do with his own performance and what he wants to achieve with his career. So if he's going to sit and ruminate about that and maybe lost chances, it could affect him. So it's interesting. I just worry that he's going to start losing his stock.
It's early doors. I think we all need to just as well take a bit of a breather when it comes to the Euros. The key thing about the Euros is it's from the last 16 onwards, games to win. And that's the only thing that matters, really. The Pogba stuff, Dave, I could probably read that next week, and I'll probably read it again in July, and I'll probably read it again next year.
Yeah, and we read it last summer, and we read it after the World Cup in 2018, and it's it's old news at this stage. But the possibility of him not signing anything until his contract has run out is a very obvious one, and it's certainly something Manchester United are going to have to consider over the course of this summer. They may even have to reconsider it in January if he has made it very clear that he won't be signing a new contract. So there's probably some merit to the story in that regard. Whether or not it's relevant at the moment, and they've spoken to parties close to the situation, that's obviously, look, we don't know the situation there, but Pogba leaving for nothing is something that's going to become more and more relevant over the weeks and months to come once they get the Euros out of the way, and particularly so given how well he's playing. And it reignites all of these conversations that we had from his time at Juventus, from how well he played for France when they won the World Cup in Russia. How can he do it in the blue of France? And he doesn't do it anywhere near often enough, or with the consistency that Manchester United would like when he's wearing a red jersey. I've read so much around it, listened to so much around it. I still don't really know, but I mean, if you're playing in a team that have the jewels in it that the French team have, both in front of him and behind him, and compare that to the sort of guys he's playing with at Old Trafford, there's definitely something in that, because he's playing with world-class players at international level. He probably has more time on the ball at international level. He's playing against some weaker sides at international level, and he just doesn't find it within himself to be able to produce that when he's playing for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. There's some people that are blaming that on the manager. I know Eamon Sweeney is today in the Sunday.
Yeah, have it here.
Yeah. So I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but
would you not be afraid there, Dave? Just the way you're describing it there, the Paul Pogba, saga that we've all been reading about for how many summers, Dave? And would you not be afraid maybe that this might happen to poor Harry Kane if he's still hanging around the next few years' time as well?
Well, I don't think you can question Harry Kane's love for Tottenham. And
True.
I think Harry Kane is definitely the sort of an individual that if he does not get this move, he's not the kind of guy that's going to sulk. He'll probably sign a lucrative longer-term deal. He'll never have to worry about money. We know that much anyway. And that he will turn around and give Tottenham the sort of commitment after this summer that he has in the last decade. I don't think that would be an issue. There's no question of Harry Kane leaving for free at some stage over the next 2 years. I just do not see that happening. Whereas I think it's a very real possibility with Paul Pogba.
Yeah, it was at the back of the Sunday Independent. Princely Pogba proves failure to fire United is all down to Ole. Paul Pogba's towering performance against Germany last Tuesday is more of an indictment of than a boost for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer writes Eamon Sweeney at the back of the Sunday Independent. And he's also had a bit of a pop at Solskjaer a few weeks ago as well, that he doesn't feel he's an elite manager for Manchester United. They're really the kind of back page, like it's not that much in the back pages, to be honest. So what is in the meat of the papers then, Máire Treasa? Let's start with the Euros and England. Obviously we all obsess about them, even though people complain that we do, but I think they're probably the best place to start.
Oh geez, yeah, Euros, if Ireland can't be in it, better if England wasn't there at all, but sure, if they're going to be there, we're going to try and find ways to pull them apart bit by bit. But I actually thought it was very interesting. The Sunday Times has got some really good coverage, and Wayne Rooney, I mean, what a revelation as a man to give analysis and commentary. I have to say, I've been really enjoying his columns, and really, like, he always brings a bit of insight. And I just thought, like, the booing and the fans of England is why, I know we were discussing this 2 weeks ago, John, is what makes them so difficult to like, never mind love or support. Like, you can try and be the bigger person and you can say, look, they play for my favourite Premier League team, why wouldn't I support them on the international stage, blah, blah, blah. But then, we see this kind of behaviour and it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and it makes it very difficult to try and build bridges with the old enemy. So, like, Wayne Rooney actually starts off his column this week discussing that booing that we all heard on our TV screens on Friday night. And I just think it must be noticeable that that's what he decides to focus on at the beginning, So he says, I was at Wembley with my two oldest lads to watch England draw with Scotland, and at full time stood and clapped the players off. Around us, there were fans booing the team. It reminded me of my time playing for England when we were jeered on more than one occasion. And I can tell you, it's never helped any individual play better, nor helped the team. I think we as a country and England supporters have to get behind our players. Gareth Southgate and his players do not deserve to be booed on Friday. I know 100% that they're giving everything to help England to do well. Those players and young lads, I know firsthand how hard it is wearing that England shirt, walking off to boos. Be patient with them. And then he goes on explaining things that he would do and changes that he would make. And he throws himself into the gauntlet where he says about they're playing Tuesday against Czech Republic. And he says, as I've been saying since the build up to the tournament, Jack Grealish has to start. And I suppose that's the big talking point, isn't it?
3 words in the article: Grealish commits defenders. I thought summed up the article for me, apart from the booing, which you pointed out there. As I've been saying since the build-up to the tournament, Jack Grealish has to start. I would also play Dominic Calvert-Lewin up front with Harry Kane. So he's got a completely different view of the way Southgate should approach the Euros, because he feels that Foden, for example, has only played for Pep and plays in Pep's system, and England are too slow in their build-up and they need a bit more spark and a bit more quick play.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just really interesting the way he... And again, this is it, isn't it? This is the effect of the outsider looking in. And okay, he's not as much of an outsider as the likes of us standing by and speculating based off what we see off TV screens and written in papers. Wayne Rooney does know what he's talking about. But you do sometimes wonder then the contrast between somebody with his, we'll call it, learned opinion and analysis, and then Gareth Southgate, who you would imagine knows those players inside out and exactly how they're going to perform, is persisting with another brand that other people are saying is too slow and not delivering enough ball up to Harry Kane, for example, and not dynamic enough. So where's the information fall off in between the two? Do you know what I mean? I find that really fascinating. So I'd love to know, like, when somebody like Wayne Rooney is seeing this, Gareth Southgate is obviously seeing something very different. Like, where is that information vacuumed? Do you know what I mean? It's fascinating.
I think also the booing is reflective of a nation that's not exactly at peace with itself and not settled. We've been kind of thinking at the moment about all this fractiousness and this expectation, and it really is, today's news is tomorrow's chip paper. They go and they beat the Czech Republic. It's all, the sunshine is out again, and that's my kind of feeling about it. I do think it is.
It's the usual boom and bust, John, around major tournaments with England. I mean, I have to admit, watching them being booed off against Scotland, I thought about that game in 2010. So it's very interesting that Wayne Rooney, he hasn't specifically mentioned that scoreless throw at Algeria in South Africa at the World Cup 11 years ago, but that was the game that I thought of, because we remember he turned to the camera as he left the field, and it was nice to see your own fans booing you. You football fans almost spat it into the camera as he was leaving the field, and obviously he was hammered for that. I think he had to come out in the aftermath and apologise for it, but we're seeing it again after a game in which they've got the point that will almost certainly qualify them for the last 16, which is all you can really ask for, just to get out of the group, and then you can reassess things and hit the reset button. They haven't lost any players to injury. They've got a couple of guys who should be presenting themselves as real options, the likes of Jordan Henderson and Harry Maguire, as the days go on and they get more training sessions under their belt. So that was the part of the article that grabbed me first. But yeah, Máire Treasa is right. His thoughts on Grealish are very committed in that he suggests that Phil Foden should be dropped. It's not a slight on Phil Foden as a player. He's a fabulous footballer, and really in any other of the top level international sides in this tournament, he would be starting because of what he can bring. But Wayne Rooney's saying that he's so conditioned as a Guardiola type Manchester City player that the way England play, such a slow build up and without any real energy or pep and moving the ball quickly, that Foden ends up having to try and go past defenders and dribble the ball, which is not his best strength. And Jack Grealish, as Rooney says, is very capable of that. And the difference between Wayne Rooney's piece this afternoon and the piece immediately below his on that page in the Sunday Times, written by Graham Souness.
And nothing about Pogba in it. I'm amazed.
Yeah, well, maybe Graham Souness has had his say in Pogba. But it's interesting. There are slight echoes in Souness's piece of Wayne Rooney's. The sentiments are similar in that he believes England won't progress with two steady eddies, as Graham Souness calls them, in Calvin Phillips and Declan Rice in their midfield. But interestingly and rather annoyingly from my point of view, Souness doesn't say who should come in. Rooney's very specific. Foden needs to be left out, and you either bring in Grealish or Jadon Sancho. Whereas Souness says you need to get rid of one of Rice or Phillips, but he doesn't say who should come in. I read the piece twice, and I think I might have missed it the first time around. An expert on how a good and creative midfield should work. And he doesn't tell me how England should set it up. He doesn't tell me who should come into the side. So that actually annoyed me. And I don't understand why that piece was allowed go through without somebody like Graham Souness telling me exactly what he would do if he was the England manager. I mean, Henderson isn't fit enough, obviously. He hasn't seen any game time. They left James Ward-Prowse out of the squad altogether. So if you do take Rice or Phillips out, tell me, Graham, who comes in? But he doesn't do that.
And Jonathan Wilson's also annoying you, I believe, today in the papers, Dave.
Yeah, it's a sentiment I just cannot get on board with. This feeling that this 24-team Euros structure is wrong and it's not fit for purpose. I just can't agree with it because, I mean, the headline in Jonathan Wilson, I'm sure Jonathan didn't write the headline himself, and I love pretty much everything that Jonathan Wilson tends to write, but the bloated format makes no sense for players or fans. And I mean, I couldn't disagree more. As a fan, I completely get this so-called bloated format. Jonathan Wilson writes that it takes 71% of the games to eliminate 33% of the teams. And factually, that's absolutely correct. But major tournaments should not be the preserve of the top nations. It should not be there for France and Germany and for Belgium and for Brazil and Argentina, the teams that are always at the World Cup, or in European terms, the teams that always qualify for the Euros. And so what if it takes a few more games? Think about the football fans of North Macedonia and Hungary, Slovakia, Finland, Scotland have had in terms of the build-up since they qualified and over the last 10 days or so, which in a 16 or 20 team European Championship tournament these days just would not come along. I mean, World Cups for these sort of nations are essentially out of the question.
This is their World Cup.
Never qualify for this is their World Cup. And the other thing about the amount of third place teams that qualify, 4 of the 6, there are very few dead rubbers going into the final round of group games. And for me, that makes it very interesting. Hungary's point that they ground out against France, it almost certainly will not be enough to get them through. But at least they go into their final game now knowing that a win should see them qualify for the last 16. Remember the case for us against Italy 5 years ago. We had that point that we took off Sweden, and we knew if we beat Italy that we'd qualify, and we did, and it was an unbelievable occasion for us. Fair enough, it's easy for an English journalist to say, well, look, this takes too long to get to this point. But England qualify for, well, bar Euro 2008, of course, they qualify for all of these competitions, whereas the lesser sides don't, and for that reason, I think UEFA's decision, albeit probably largely backed by monetary...
Wholly.
It still has the other consequence of bringing a North Macedonia to a major tournament, or Albania, as was the case in Euro 2016, Northern Ireland getting to the last 16 and beating Ukraine. I was at that game. It was a phenomenal occasion. I don't care about the fact that the top nations have to maybe play an extra game or two. If anything, it helps them because their larger depth, bigger squads allows them to rest players in the last round of games. But I completely disagree with Jonathan Wilson on this.
Also, Lille creates social currency and lasting memories for people who would have been there, that they can bring to their conversations and tell their children. And also, we have a situation where the fascinating thing for me with the Euro so far is Italy, everybody's raving about, and they should be, right? 29 games unbeaten, 10 games in a row they've won, no goals conceded in 965 minutes. But a new competition effectively starts at the last 16, and we might not necessarily see teams that have shown their full hand yet then produce things later on in the competition. So to me, I can't really decipher or tell you at this stage who the main protagonists are going to be for the final. And that is the beauty of this Euro so far. So I think it's been great entertainment.
Yeah, I've loved it. I've watched all bar, I think, 2 games, and I've certainly watched the highlights of the games that I have missed, and I've really enjoyed it. I lament the fact that today is the beginning of round 3 of the group games, because I get so used to having 3 or certainly 2 games of football on every day. Now we're actually going to only really get to watch half of the final rounds of games because they have to kick off simultaneously. So we're really only going to be watching another few games before we get into the knockout stages. And that's why I love the group stage in the World Cup. It's why I love the group stage in the European Championships, because it is a feast of football where every game, bar maybe a situation where a side has 2 wins and plays a reserve team in the last game because they're already through, but nearly every game has so much riding on it. And you saw the amount of fans that it's in some of the stadiums. The setup in Budapest, for example, obviously there has been some issues around that, and they're very difficult to love, the Hungarians, given their sentiments in some ways. But it was an enormous occasion, and they really gave France a run for their money yesterday. And ordinarily, Hungary most likely wouldn't have qualified for a tournament of a European Championship that had only 20 teams or 16 teams in it.
Briefly, Máire Treasa, about a minute left on this. I think life's coming back, though. I feel things are coming back. That is one of the key takeaways for me from the Euros as well, you know?
Yeah, it's just really nice to participate in it, even if it is on our couches far away where we're on the sideline and not involved in it, you know. But it's just a nice sign of that life and the normal that we used to know is coming back, and we're all getting closer again to putting on that jersey and going off to a game to support your team, be that your national team or whatever team you might support across the water, or even now as well, League of Ireland, you know, we're getting closer and closer to it, and Gaelic games, everything. It's just, maybe we appreciate it more. Maybe we didn't know the joy we had until it was taken away from us.
We have Kilkenny and Galway in the Camogie tonight with fans at Croke Park. 53106 if you want to get in touch and ask questions to Dave McIntyre or Máire Treasa and Cheallaigh on the Sunday pay-per-view. Plenty more to talk about between 2 and 3. We're back after this.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Listen in the car with Apple CarPlay or Android Auto on the News Talk app. Powered by Go Loud.
Afternoons are easy with InsureMyVan.ie, Ireland's low-cost van insurance specialist. Get your business back on the road with InsureMyVan's best price guarantee. For super savings, visit InsureMyVan.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
At Bow Concept, we believe you deserve the best in timeless contemporary Danish design. And now it's more affordable than ever, with extraordinary savings across our furniture collection. Allow our in-store designers to tailor our Scandinavian design classics to your space. Shop safely in store at Beacon South Quarter and Arnott's Henry Street. Bow Concept sale now on.
Inspiration can ignite in a multitude of ways. When we travel to new places, experience new technologies, when we feel more connected to the world around us. Now is the time to inspire your future, to drive an Audi. Discover the range of offers available on the 212 Audi A6, Q2 and fully electric e-tron, online or at your local Audi dealership. Audi. Future is an attitude. Visit Audi Centre Bracken Road, Sandyford today to avail of our exclusive offers and test drive your future Audi.
Ireland is recovering from the pandemic. The reopening of our economy and society for June is completed, and we can look forward to further substantial reopening in July. Thanks to the very high level of uptake by the Irish people, our vaccination programme is working for all of our benefit, with over 60% of the adult population having now received at least 1 dose. Our new economic recovery plan will help people to get back to work. As we recover, it is as important as ever to stick to the public health guidelines. Think outdoors, and even outdoors, keep your distance, avoid crowds, and wear a face covering when in busy places. Shop safely and socialise safely. If we keep working together, we can keep moving forward. For full details, visit gov.ie/recovery. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
At Vodafone Business, we've seen incredible resilience shine through Irish businesses, and we know that we can. We can find new ways of doing things. We can work smarter, not harder. We can connect wherever we are. We can take business to the next level with Vodafone technology across broadband, mobile and cloud solutions. Search Vodafone Business to find out more. Together, we can.
Auctioneers, estate agents, letting agents and property management agents operating in the Republic of Ireland must hold a PSRA licence. An auctioneer may auction land, fine arts, antiques or animals at a mart. When engaging an agent, don't assume your agent is licensed. Check the PSRA register of licensed agents at psr.ie. Unlicensed agents are breaking the law. Report unlicensed operators to info@psr.ie. Remember, no PSRA licence, no consumer protection.
Hey, it's me, your hunch. You know how much your heart races watching your team. Thanks to Betway, you can keep on the pulse of the beautiful game when you heed your hunch. Whether we're backing the underdogs against the big dogs, predicting that there'll be a last-minute winner against the run of play, or even feeling that there'll be goals galore instead of a bore draw. At Betway, you can back them all.
Heed your hunch on the Euros at Betway. Visit the website or download the Betway app. 18 plus terms and conditions applied on louis.net. Bet the responsible way.
This is on-post commerce. This is doing business across distance as if distance doesn't matter. This is finding new ways to reach out to customers. This is simple, powerful tools and technology that make it easy to connect. This is the support you need to promote, sell, deliver and succeed. This is opening doors and opportunities and possibilities. This is small, local, big, global. Search on Post Commerce, a world closer.
Now at Power City, save €200 when you purchase any of the Whirlpool range of large capacity 4-door fridge freezers. The Whirlpool Jupiter range is frost free and comes with a 5-year warranty. For more information, visit powercity.ie.
This week on News Talk, it's the Great Gadget Giveaway. 5 days, 25 chances to win. And these aren't just any gadgets either.
There are Samsung 65-inch TVs, there are Dyson V11s, iPhone 12s, KitchenAid stand mixers, Ninja air fryers, Sage coffee machines, Smeg kettles and toasters, and Samsung Galaxy tabs.
All you have to do is answer one simple question. Listen out for one of the 25 chances to win throughout the week and grab yourself one of the most sought-after gadgets.
The Great Gadget Giveaway. 5 days, 25 chances to win. This week on News Talk.
Join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards National Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Jane Tobin. An immunology professor says it's inevitable border counties will start to see an increase in the Delta variant. The strain accounts for 25% of COVID-19 cases in the north. The chief medical officers on both sides of the border have appealed to the public to avoid activities which could put them at risk of contracting the virus. Professor Kingston Mills of Trinity College Dublin says the spread of the Delta variant is dependent on what travel restrictions are put in place.
I can't see any way that if the Delta variant becomes the dominant variant in Northern Ireland, that we're going to stop it from becoming the dominant variant, at least initially in the border counties, unless we put in place extremely stringent travel measures, not only with the mainland of UK, but also with Northern Ireland.
The COVID-19 vaccine portal is now open for people in their 30s. Those aged 35 to 39 can register for a vaccine from today. It's expected people in that cohort will be given their jabs next month, while vaccination of people in their 20s will start in late July or early August. Meanwhile, there are 288 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 here in Ireland. The Department of Health has said there are currently 49 patients with the virus in hospital. The number of people being treated in ICU is up 1 to 15. The former master of Holles Street Hospital says he's concerned about clinical independence at the new National Maternity Hospital. The Sisters of Charity transferred land ownership of the site to a new charity which will operate the hospital and lease it to the state. The religious orders accounts last year's state directors at this charity would be obliged to uphold the values of the sisters, meaning the hospital would be run with a Catholic ethos. Dr. Peter Boylan says unless the land is owned by the state, there are no guarantees of clinical independence at the new hospital.
Unless the land is owned by the state, and the new National Maternity Hospital has no connection whatsoever with St Vincent's Holdings, then there can be no guarantee of independence of clinical work in the new hospital.
Finally, McDonald's has announced it's to grow its workforce here to 3,000. The fast food chain is to create 800 new jobs right across the country. The positions will be in restaurants across 19 different counties. It's 2:02.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Go to a Premier League game this year with daily flights to London, Liverpool and Manchester.
Staying largely dry and bright in the east and northeast of the country throughout the afternoon. However, it will remain generally cloudy over the rest of the country, with outbreaks of showery rain turning heavy in places and a risk of an isolated thunderstorm. Top temperatures of 16 to 20 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
And welcome back to Off the Ball here on News Talk. John Duggan sitting in for Joe Malloy until 7. You can listen to us on News Talk and watch us on the digital and social channels for Off the Ball, for Periscope and Twitter, at Off the Ball, YouTube, Facebook and on the OTB Sports app. Search OTB Sports in your app store to download it if you haven't already. We're continuing our review of the best stories of your Sunday with the Virgin Media commentator Dave McIntyre and the broadcaster and accredited sports psychologist Máire Treasa. Text in here on 53106. Howdy folks, I love Off the Ball. What other sports radio show on either side of the water would compare Harry Kane to last year's Guna? There you go, Máire Treasa. Damien and Santry, one of many people paying close attention to what you're saying.
Oh dear, I apologise to all the fashionistas out there, because people would say my football knowledge is very low, but my fashion knowledge is probably even lower.
Well, I wouldn't say that. It was interesting the point Dave made before 2 o'clock about expectation setting, and our expectation with the national team with soccer, which is the biggest show in town, has always come out of our past legacy: Italia 90, USA 94, Korea, Japan 02. Now I think that the realistic expectation is that we should qualify for Euros and have a good time, but also play, more importantly, good football at a European Championship. The World Cup, in its current existence with 13 European teams, is a bonus. That will change when we get to the 48 teams in the States and Canada and Mexico in 2026. But Eamon Sweeney at the back of the Sunday Independent, Máire Treasa, has been writing about this.
Yeah, it's a really interesting piece and actually quite thought-provoking. I was reading it going, oh yeah, maybe he has a point there, yeah. And he's talking about how basically there's no reason, too much down talk has been done of the Republic of Ireland team at the moment, to people saying, oh, we can never expect to go there. And he's saying, for example, there's no reason Ireland can't emulate Slovakia and Finland or aspire to the heights reached by Wales, which is actually very true. There's no reason why any Irish footballer couldn't be looking at the Europeans right now and saying, geez, look at Wales, look what they've done. Or even look at Scotland and see how their performance was so good against England on Friday night. It's been painted as England didn't play, whereas really Scotland didn't let them play. But I just thought he gives a little interesting vignette when he says, Ireland don't possess the same quality of players that we did 10 years ago, but other countries are coping better with limited resources. Now, you could argue perhaps those other countries perhaps have had administrations that haven't been as upheavaled, we'll say, over the last few years as Ireland's has been. And he says, it may be that Ireland will never again reach the heights of the Charlton era, but that still leaves us plenty to play for. One of the unfortunate byproducts of Saipan was the insane insistence that not only could we have won the 2002 World Cup, but that anything short of such a triumph could be considered a failure. And that is very true. Who remembers? And we still hear people saying that if it wasn't for the way Saipan happened and rolled out, and it wasn't for the way that, we saw the matches that happened then afterwards, who knows? And I find that actually fascinating, that actually nearly 20 years later, there are people who still maintain that position, that had Saipan ended out differently, had perhaps Roy Keane did put the boots on and did think of the children and did play, we might have been World Cup winners.
Yeah, it was interesting because there was actually a link to that in the Sunday Times, because Stephen Reid is profiled in the paper there, the Sunday Times, because he's now a coach and he's assistant with Scotland under Steve Clarke. He ended up making 2 appearances as a sub in Japan and also watching Roy Keane self-combust, an experience he brought to Scotland's pre-Euros preparations by using as a warning for leaving players with too much time in their hands in the build-up to major tournaments. A nice profile on Stephen Reid, who with Lee Carsley, Dave, is making waves in coaching in England and Scotland.
Yeah, it's great to see Stephen Reid enjoying the role he has with Steve Clarke, who he grew to know very closely during their time at West Bromwich Albion, enjoying it as much as he has done. And he seems to be playing a really integral role in the Scottish coaching setup and the way that they are approaching these games. And Máire Treasa's right, they played some really nice stuff, albeit with less possession than England, obviously, in that game. And they have some players who are coming through that Ireland would kill to have in their starting 11, and not just the obvious ones like Robertson and Tierney, who are just brilliant footballers at fullback, but the manner in which Billy Gilmore has been able to put his stamp on the European Championships, having played so little football for Chelsea over the last few months. And I think he's just 20 years of age, and what a prospect he is. And like Wales as well, Kiefer Moore, what they're getting out of him up front, a player that was a bit of an unknown quantity 3 or 4 years ago. I think he was playing non-league football, and look at the sort of the manner in which he could spearhead their attack. And it should inspire us, and it should keep letting us know that we have players in our squad at the moment that, given a little bit of self-belief and a bit of confidence and a bit of patience, that they could go on and achieve some things in the green of Ireland under Stephen Kenny and his backroom team. And I think in the last couple of games, albeit, yes, Andorra, and we were trailing in that game, and it could have been just one of those, and yet another nightmarish night for this management team. And the manner in which we played against Hungary in a full stadium, a Hungary side that were looking to take a bit of momentum into the Euros, there was the first seeds and green shoots of progress, in my opinion. And Eamon Sweeney is right. He not only does he think that they should be allowed to see out the remainder of the World Cup qualifying campaign, but they should actually be given the chance to qualify for the Euros as well. And it goes back to the piece that we discussed before the news break with Jonathan Wilson in the Sunday Independent, that is where we need to be targeting any future successes, not the World Cup. The World Cup qualifying campaign in the remaining games that are in it should be used to get ready for Euro 2024. And it's after that we can judge whether or not Stephen Kenny's reign has been a disaster or it has been a success or somewhere in between.
Probably be somewhere in between, to be honest, at this stage. The Gaelic game is rising because the championship is upon us. Máire Treasa, where do you want to start with what we have in the papers?
I think I'd have to start with the Mail on Sunday, and I would actually tell people who, if they haven't gone out for their Sunday papers yet, you might be thinking it's a bit late in the day, there's no point in getting them now, but if you're a Gaelic Games fan and if you're in the mood for good analysis and stuff, go get yourself the Mail on Sunday. There's some really good articles in there. But I think one that's going to pick up steam over the next few days and weeks is once our heads and thoughts and minds perhaps turn from the Euros and from the league. And obviously we know the league hasn't been perfect and it gave us great games, but obviously we know there haven't been league finals aside from yesterday's, obviously. But we're going to start talking about the knockout and the knockout nature of championship and the knockout allegedly appeal, which Shane McGrath has a great article here in the Mail today talking about how it does little for the likes of Clare's David Tubridy. And we can all talk about the romance of the knockout, and if it wasn't for the knockout we wouldn't have had the story of Cavan and the story of Tipperary, and they're great stories and they're going to go down to the annals of history. But are they really doing teams and players in particular, are they doing them justice? Like when you think of the amount of years, and never mind even the last year in particular, that David Tubridy has put into playing for Clare, and the hours of training and the injury prevention and the injuries and the rehab and the physio and the time lost from work and personal life. And then, as Shane McGrath puts it very succinctly and very black and white, right in his first line, in 6 days' time, the Clare footballers will be done for the year. They play Kerry in the Munster Championship next Saturday night. The game will be played in Fitzgerald Stadium, regularly cited as the most picturesque GAA venue on the island. For their rivals in Munster, it must hold all the attraction of an abattoir. And that's the long and short of it, is unless Clare pull off a miracle, which, and that's not to disrespect Clare in any way, shape or form. They're a wonderful team of footballers who, when we were talking earlier about Eamon Sweeney's piece about how the Irish team should be looking and seeing what you can do with the talent you have instead of bemoaning what you don't have. Clare has great talent, and Colm Collins has found a way to get the absolute best out of those players on and off the field. But barring major incident, David Tubridy's and the rest of that Clare's team's championship dreams are over next Saturday night. And I know we're in a pandemic, and I know the GAA were, when you think about it, it's miraculous. Any games are being played, especially last year. Was there any way at all that we could have found a qualifier or a backdoor route? I would have loved to have seen it. I suppose my opinion doesn't count for much, but I just think it's very cruel that there are teams all over the country who, next weekend aren't going to be playing anymore.
Also makes it more likely, Dave, that Dublin win the All-Ireland again.
Yeah, it does. There are fewer days for them to be got at, as would have been the case maybe in a backdoor in a Super 8s, for example. And yeah, it's so hard to see beyond the Dublin-Kerry final, and then it's just a question of whether Kerry can go close to what they did in 2019 and maybe get over the line. And I do find that unsettling to an extent, that the championship hasn't even begun and we're already talking about there really only being 2 teams that can possibly compete against each other, and that in all certainty the final pairing is almost set in stone. But look, let's give some credit to the GAA. I would find it very unlikely that there's anybody in the higher echelons of the GAA in Croke Park that believe a knockout format is the best format.
Oh, agreed. Agreed, yeah.
So, yeah, there's nobody that thinks that this is the way it should be.
It's the scheduling.
And last year, it is a scheduling issue. And last year, it was all down to nostalgia. And I had that warm...
You got the Cavan thing.
Coat of, we had the Cavan thing, and we had that warm, fuzzy coat of nostalgia where you remember going up, well, from my personal circumstances, being dragged all over Ulster, the 9 counties in my childhood, and everything was on the line. And these really hot, sticky, suffocating afternoons where you were watching Cavan play Donegal or Tyrone or Armagh, and you knew that it was up to this 70 minutes, and then after that, one of these teams was done for the rest of the year. And it was almost an exhausting experience, but it was an exhilarating one as well. But it was not the right way for things to be, and that's why the qualifying and the backdoor system came into place. And I don't think they had any option last year. Their hands were tied. The question around this debate this time around is, was there an alternative? Was there a way the schedule could have been rejigged? Could they possibly have started things a couple of weeks earlier? Could they have got rid of the league format completely and just got a championship in place so that after a few weeks training and maybe some challenge matches, so they could have enough dates in the calendar to play qualifiers? My personal opinion is that 2021 will be seen as a lost year when it came to experimenting with a radical championship structure. Scrap the provincial championships for 1 year only on a trial basis, cite COVID-19 and the pandemic as the major reasoning behind it, put it in stone on paper that this was a 12-month deal only, and that in 2022, well, even after a review of everything, we would go back to the provincial championship and backdoor system if necessary. But you play the 8 groups of 4, where the top 2 end up in a last 16 in an A championship, and the bottom 2 play in the last 16 of a B championship. You play both finals over the course of a couple of weekends at Croke Park, hopefully with fans. Everybody, at the bare minimum, gets 4 championship games, and then next year we could revert to type if necessary. There would have been the time to do that. There would not be a situation where David Tubridy and Clare are heading to Killarney next Saturday night, and I'm on commentary for that for Sky, and I can't wait to be there, and it's going to be a good occasion. But barring a shock of absolutely cataclysmic proportions, Clare are going to be done. And David Tubridy was one of those players likely to walk away after last year's championship. He didn't follow in the footsteps of Gordon Kelly and Gary Brennan and leave. He decided to give it another go. I'm sure he's glad he did so, because he's written himself into the annals of the record books in league history. But David Tubridy's not going to get to play championship again for Clare almost certainly after next weekend. And look at Sligo, for example, and it's something that Mark O'Shea has cited in his piece in the Mail on Sunday today. Sligo didn't get to kick a ball in last year's championship because of COVID-19 cases in their camp. Tony McIntyre is going to bring them to play Mayo next weekend, and they're going to be beaten, and they'll have played 1 championship match in 2 years. And that is an awful situation for them to be in.
Unless the Cillian O'Connor injury skews the potential for that to not happen, for them to win. I think the lesson of this is they got to get it right next year. They got to get it right next year, structurally.
But we know what's happening next year, John. We are going to go down the line where there's going to be no qualifiers or backdoor for the Division 3 and Division 4 sides. So there are going to be some sides in the championship in 21 and 22 that will play 1 game. And then they will go into this second tier competition. And there are very few people that think that's the way to go as well. I just think that this was the year, this was the opportunity where you could rip it up for 12 months and then take a step back and assess how everything had gone. And I think that chance has been lost. And while I do think someday, somewhere down the line, we will end up in this Champions League type format, this was a year where you could make an excuse for it and manage to get it in there and just see how things panned out.
I think they need to rip it up straight away. I think they need to just completely...
That's not going to happen, though.
Yeah, I wish they would, though.
We know what...
Well, because they ripped it up to get the club and the inter-county season separate. So why can't they do it for the championship?
Well, to be fair to them, and I always cite this whenever we are giving out, because that's technically what we are doing, they're in charge of every club in the island of Ireland and the county scene, and the two don't operate well together, you know what I mean? One gets in the way of the other. and then they've got football and hurling to be dealing with as well. So there's a lot of, and then it's nearly too democratic. If you wanted to rip something up and start again, it would be very difficult because there's a democracy at play in this as well. So I understand why it's slow to change, but I do agree with Dave that this was the year that if you wanted to rip up the rule book and go for it, you were able to do it. Because like you said, John, last year we managed to do it with the club and county. And this actually segues very well then into Mark O'Shea's article, because he's saying that the GAA are paying the price for the slow return, you know, and hindsight's a great thing, obviously, you know, but with all the injuries we're seeing now, had the county teams be allowed back to train a bit earlier, we might have had fewer injuries. And you know, it's easy to say now, but, you know, now they're playing catch up and we're seeing it's taking its toll on the bodies. And just between that and the fact that the league then was kind of devalued, like if you start a competition, you probably should finish it, especially because we had some great games as well. It was a good league. It was great fun to participate in. It was great to watch. And I just sometimes wonder, and I get why the GAA find this so difficult, but have they not maybe cut their own legs out from under themselves? They had the opportunity for 2 wonderful showcases this summer between the league and trying something new, and it didn't happen. Now, I'm sure there's very good reasons why it didn't, but it's an awful shame that one, the league wasn't finished and we didn't try something different for championship this year. It was the stage was set. Everybody would have just been delighted to be at the show.
Yeah, I just wish there was a 5 to 10 year plan for this, that in 10 years' time we're going to have provinces either not happening at all or in the spring, and you have your provincial championship and you have your lovely winner, but then you actually have a league championship in the summer. That means something. Like I'm reading Mark O'Shea saying that sometimes the league mattered, sometimes it didn't. I'm tired of the league. I'm just tired of it. It's great for Division 3 and 4 teams, but have that in the summer and have meaning to it, and have different tiers of finals, and have super weekends, and have teams travelling around the country, and this kind of hodgepodge of a structure. To me, I can't understand why we couldn't have had no hurling league and actually had the round robin in Leinster and Munster. It would have been much more entertaining, would have been much more meaningful than what we're going to have now in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, it is. You look at it, and it's this old debate where you look at the championship structure as things stand at the moment. Kerry are going to beat a Division 2 team in Clare to get to a Munster final, so to within 70 minutes of an All-Ireland semi-final, where a team in a similar position up in Ulster could be drawn in the preliminary round and are going to have to fight their way out of the Ulster Championship to get to the same place as Kerry and play lesser opposition. Kerry will be then the sides up in Ulster where there are more Division 1 sides, and you've got teams like Derry and Armagh that are very much on the rise. You have Monaghan holding on to their Division 1 status, and then you have the perennial favourites in Tyrone and Donegal. Tipperary, the reigning Munster champions, are now a Division 4 team. Now, I know it's the same in Ulster with Cavan, but there are so many other sides that have a realistic chance of taking on anybody in Ulster, and we don't have that in the situation that currently resides in Munster, and it is outdated. I think there's a place for the provincial championships, but as you say, John, play them a bit earlier in the year, come up if absolutely necessary with some way to link it to the championship, a league-style championship format. But we've seen how important the league has been to teams this year. Look at Offaly, for example, back-to-back promotions. They're really making strides under John Mahon. They got to play in Croke Park yesterday. Derry with back-to-back promotions under Rory Gallagher, playing a brand of football that I don't think anybody would have previously associated with Rory Gallagher coach teams. There is so much to be excited about going into the championship until you come back to the realisation with a resounding bump that Dublin are going to play Kerry in an All-Ireland final in a few weeks' time.
Kevin's been in touch on 53106. Surely the problem is that the league is discounted in GA. Season over after one game. Were there not league games? No other team sport places all its focus on a cup competition. That's his text there on 53106. Any other GA writing that we like, Máire Treasa?
Definitely, I think the Mark O'Shea article as well worth a good read, just explaining the impact of injuries. There's also a great 2-pager called A Special Report by Philip Lanigan for the hurling snobs, of which we all are, I suppose. And it's all based around research that is done by Paul O'Brien. He's done a Masters in Sports Performance Analysis, and he has analysed, I suppose, the evolution of hurling, and there's 2 pages there. There's heat maps of the shots of the top teams. There's opposition puckouts won, own puckouts won. There's graphs, there's diagrams. But the interesting fact of all this, what you see before your eyes, you have to believe it. There is no metric at all where Limerick are not in the top 5. And if the GAA, they're talking about the GAA's new committee about hurling, and if they want to examine how the game is changing, they could be well served delving into this detailed forensic study. And there's so many tidbits in it that I don't even know where to start with it. But I just thought it was very interesting that the reason he started off in the whole thing was He wanted more to go on than a loose opinion of the game. And no surprise, Limerick jump off the page. So people are saying Limerick do this, they're successful, or Tipperary do this and they're successful, and Dublin aren't good because of this, or Wexford fall down because of this, that kind of stuff. And what he was trying to do is get an overall picture what hurling is about. So you get the stats, you learn that it is all still very much a turnover-based game because of the skill involved, where the scores are coming from. A third or less of scores are coming from your own puck out. So you can see then how Limerick was hoovering it up, and then you can see, so you'd imagine the opposition have the upper hand because they have the ball, but it's turned over as their defensive shape isn't as good, and it's a little easier to score. And stuff like that is important because if you look at the last 3 years, Limerick, Galway and Tip have been the most successful teams, but less of their scores are coming from that structured puck out. So even stuff like that, it's just fascinating that you actually have data. And I thought it was interesting where he says, without a question, Limerick are the best. Kylie's rant a few weeks ago about the freeze and the simulation, in my opinion, he was so annoyed at that because Limerick fouled the most. He has the data there. The heat maps, and they foul in the most non-threatening, in non-threatening areas. I've heat maps in the foul areas of different teams. There's talks about these cynical fouls where there's a lot of goal opportunity going on. A lot of the teams, that D area, there's a considerable amount of fouls. And interestingly, O'Brien doesn't buy some of the alarmist noises during the current league campaign about the hurling going the way of a non-contact sport. So he says, on the contact element of it, there's a congested amount of bodies in that middle area. If you're going to try and walk a ball through that, there's going to be contact. So he says it bugs me to an extent. Football is considered to be this game where there's loads of tackling going on, but when Dublin played Roscommon in the first round of the league, and even Dublin-Kerry, the players are carrying the ball beyond the 45 before there's a tackle made. So just really interesting. You could read it over with tea, and even I read it this morning. I read it before we came on air, and I'm reading it now again and picking out different bits. Even the tallies of TJ Reid, it's fascinating. You'd want a highlighter and your own kind of little wall chart.
There's the highlighter. There's the highlighter for anybody watching.
Brilliant.
Máire Treasa, there's two aspects to what you said there, and one, you're talking about the fouls that the Limerick players commit in non-threatening areas. The problem is there are almost no non-threatening areas left on a hurling field nowadays. I mean, if you foul someone on their own 21, I mean, if there's a little bit of a breeze, there's a good chance their goalkeeper, if it's his name escapes me, the Kilkenny goalkeeper,
Owen Murphy.
Owen Murphy can stick the ball over almost from the edge of the square. So there's very few non-threatening areas left on a hurling pitch nowadays. And the second part of it is, and it's a brilliant piece from Philip Lanigan, and it's called the Special Report, and he's obviously put an awful lot of effort into it. And I recommend anybody with a real interest in the small ball and that game, have a read of it. But the stats and the data are one thing, but the eye test is another. And we all have our own opinions on what we're actually seeing, whatever about the statistics, and when it's laid out for you on a piece of paper or on a laptop screen. If you're watching a game in which one player called Tony Kelly or TJ Reid can walk away with 120 or 18 points and the full-time score is something like 132 to 226, it's very hard for you to leave the stadium that day and really feel that you've seen a really good, physical, hard-hitting contest, because there are so many breaks in the game. And a tally of 120 on paper looks great, but if you break it down and you find that there may be only 3 of those scores were from play, I have no interest in watching a free-taking contest. And
I would argue that you probably, while we saw that in the league, because literally this year in hurling, the league is the league, really was the name of the game, and I just feel that we won't see this in championship, coupled with the crowds coming back as well. Maybe that's optimism, Dick.
That's it's a really valid point, and that's why maybe this debate needs to be had in the autumn, once we do actually get to see whether or not we get a similar type of pattern emerging over the next 2 months.
You won't see a 30 points to 19 then win for Limerick in an All-Ireland final, Máire Treasa, is what you're saying?
I would hope not. Of course, people are going to play this back to me now after the All-Ireland.
The article was brilliant, and it really gave me an insight into why Limerick is so dominant, but it did not give me the answer to why the scores have increased exponentially in recent years in the hurling championship.
I would argue that the answer that I extrapolated from this, and I could be completely wrong, but the conclusion I came to this is the reason Limerick are completely dominant is they figured out how to game the system, which was by being strong, committing fouls, and I mean that in the best possible way, strategic fouls in a way to help their game plan. They're strong men. They've grown up under a system that has gotten the best out of themselves as well. And this shows how they managed to game it in a way that worked towards their strengths, and that's why they're dominant, and other teams are catching up with them, I feel.
I suppose the debate really, though, at the moment, isn't it, is hurling as enjoyable as it was to watch?
I think it will be once championship rolls into town.
Dave?
I reserve judgment on that at the moment.
You're pleading the fifth.
Yeah, I think I am. I'm looking forward to a really good championship. I enjoyed last year's championship immensely, and I didn't think I would, going to stadiums as a commentator that had no supporters in them. But that the Kilkenny-Waterford game, for example, was a classic for me, and one I really enjoyed. Less of a classic was the game between Galway and Limerick, but it was as absorbing, again, despite the fact there were no fans at Croke Park. And I think there will be many of those this year. I do lament the absence of the round robin in Munster and Leinster, which I enjoyed hugely for the couple of seasons that we had it, and they will come back hopefully in 2022. But as we said, as detailed a piece as it is from Philip Lanigan in the Mail on Sunday, it doesn't address the complaints and the issues that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. Now, hopefully Championship will take care of a lot of it. Maybe some referees will try and allow the game to flow a little bit more. But James Scahill, the former Galway goalkeeper, was on off the ball a couple of times in the last fortnight, and he had some really interesting insights into the reasons why we're seeing so many high-scoring games. And a lot of it is down to the fact that the ball is too light and the hurley is too big. And then you combine that with the immense strides taken in strength and conditioning.
Limerick, yeah.
Mm.
And that these guys are just able to do things with a hurley and a slither that players in previous generations could never possibly have dreamt of doing. And it's a similar debate to the one that we have in golf all of the time. You can't just keep making the golf courses longer because these guys can hit the ball further. There has to be a different way to approach this thing. And eventually, they're probably going to have to do something about the size of the boss on these hurleys and how lightweight that slither is.
Or the grooves on the slither.
And the grooves on the slither as well, the edges on it, which is something that James Scahill was saying, that it is conducive to hitting the ball further. And these guys are as ripped and as well maintained athletically as they are. Someone like Owen Murphy's going to be able to put the ball over from his own 21.
53106. Offaly will have played Fermanagh, Derry, Louth and possibly Kildare in the time period where Leitrim will have played no game. Their last game was May 30th. Their next is July the 11th, says Liam in Longford. Never forget it, Clare, because of Clare connections. Clare 113, Offaly 28 was the score in the 1995 All-Ireland hurling final. I don't think the experience was anyway inferior. Or the Kilkenny Cork game in 1999 was 13 points to 12. Incredible game. They
were incredible games, Sean, but I think the game of hurling in the last 10 years is far better to watch than the games in those days. I mean, when Wexford won their All-Ireland in 96, it was a very low-scoring final against Limerick. And yeah, that's absorbing, enthralling. There's so much at stake. Wexford had to wait so long for their All-Ireland. Limerick hadn't won an All-Ireland since 73. Even back in 96, they were already in the midst of a drought, and they didn't get to end that until this decade. But if you think of the games involving Kilkenny and Tip, those trilogy of games, the manner in which Joe Canning fired that ball over from the Cusack stand side to beat Tipperary when in the year that Galway won their All-Ireland, you didn't really see scores like that in the 90s and in the 80s and the 70s. But the problem is the scores from play are being dwarfed now by the scores from frees. And a player is getting cuter. The forwards are getting cuter. They know exactly how to milk the frees. Even the half-backs coming out with the ball know how to win a free. And the whistle is just being blown way too often. And instead of a ball being slid down the channels and into a wing forward who might turn and try and sling it over his shoulder and over the bar, there's a very good chance that ball instead is going to go straight over the bar from a centre half-back that can stick the ball over from way out the field.
Just want to bring people's attention to an article I think everybody should read. John Green has written in the Sunday Independent about a difficult situation at a club in County Meath St Mary's. In September of 2015, there was a plan to dismantle a roof of a building at the club. One of the volunteers, Seamus Brady, fell through the roof. He landed on the concrete floor, sustaining serious injuries. It's gone to a legal case. He's not been able to work since the accident. I think it's definitely worth people having a look at. What I would say, the takeaway that I had from the article is that it's important for all volunteers to be made crystal clear about what's covered when it comes to insurance at GAA clubs, because it's a very sad case. It's had ramifications for the individual, for the community, and I definitely think it's worth everybody taking a look at that article from John Green today. And camogie-wise as well, we've got a league final tonight, Máire Treasa, and there's also talk about the way camogie has dealt with its own issues around how the game is played.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking about the men evolving in their strengths and their skills and performance analysis and everything, by God, the women's sport has been pulling up its socks as well. Mark Gallagher has a really interesting piece with Miriam Walsh, cousin, of course, of the great Tommy Walsh and cousin of Grace Walsh, who she'll be playing with tonight, and talking about how she picked up her strength as a hurler, playing with the Tullaroan boys back in the day because they didn't have a camogie team, and she attests to her camogie skills and her strengths to being able to play with the lads, which I thought was really interesting because obviously we know boys and girls really at that age physiologically were very, very similar, and it's only as we get a bit older that the differences come through. And Vera Powell, he cites as well, that she says, you know, girls should be playing with boys. And there's an article as well in the Times, Dennis Walsh has it in page 17, also about camogie, and he's talking about the league final this evening as well, but the changing vision of how camogie actually took on board, to be fair to them, feedback over the last few years. The women were getting stronger. The game was still being refereed in a way where I suppose ladies played it back in the day, where women weren't as strong. Women didn't have the physicality. Tackles were being blown up as fouls when they weren't really. So they reviewed things. They decided they took a survey, they spoke to people, they created a committee, and actually Dennis, he cites Cots Devan here saying the old rules didn't allow us to display the wealth of talents that we have. So what changed? And this is the interesting point for people who mightn't be fully aware of the change of those rules. A side tackle with minimal force, which of course always makes it open to interpretation for a referee, is now permitted. Dropping the hurley is outlawed, as are hand pass goals. More than 30 years after hurling made the leave. Penalties must now be struck from outside the 20-metre line, but 3 players are no longer permitted on the goal line, just the goalkeeper. So that shows the involvement of camogie. And it's interesting as well, you know, he pulls a comparison saying, you know, that he did the rule differences between hurling and camogie, and a total came up to 41 in the differences. And bit by bit, these things are changing. And he makes the interesting point as well. All over the country, former hurlers are being asked to coach camogie teams. And it wasn't actually till 1999, I didn't realise this, they went to 15-a-side pitch and moved to a full-size GA pitch. And all of a sudden, they became open to the importance of bringing in, I suppose, listening to the science and seeing what's happening. And I think the first time we saw kind of a real impact on this, it was a game down the Gaelic grounds in All-Ireland semi-final 2 years ago between, I think, Galway and Cork, and it was amazing hurling to watch because it wasn't being blown up. Just the things that Dave was complaining about there. It became a free-taking contest, and that's boring to watch. Camogie, for the last few years, that was an accusation that could fairly be thrown at them. We can't throw it at them anymore, and we should have a really good league final tonight, I hope.
Absolutely, 7:30 throw in at Croke Park for Kilkenny and Galway. 5-3-106 make the focus on the league. 3 divisions, play each team twice, games over the summer, knockout championship to run alongside it. Open draw for the whole country. Do away with the provincial, says Connor in Dublin. It would help both hurling and football if the foul players had to take the free themselves. Not a bad idea. And hi guys, what about ground hurling and pulling off the air? Gone forever. Remember John Fenton and Jimmy Barry Murphy, says Tom in Cork. And a bit of an insulting text here on 53106. Jesus, Duggan, the Euros are on. You're talking non-stop bog ball and stick wars. I prefer to listen to opinions about Ronaldo, not my local plumber playing for Wicklow, says Colin. Well, Colin, the early bird catches the worm. 1:30 we started the pay-per-view. We spoke for half an hour about the Euros, but you can listen back on the podcast. But the pay-per-view does continue with more Treasa Ní Cheallaigh and Dave McIntyre after this.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
As the country reopens, it's more important than ever to keep it local. To feature your business on The Pat Kenny Show, email us on local@newstalk.com. With thanks to Square.
Afternoons are easy with InsureMyVan.ie, Ireland's low-cost van insurance specialist. Get your business back on the road with InsureMyVan's best price guarantee. For super savings, visit InsureMyVan.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, training as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
First up, a Go Loud original from Newstalk.
Get all the news you need to start your day with First Up, the podcast that brings you stories, analysis and interviews with the top newsmakers. First Up, available each weekday morning from 7 a.m. on Go Loud.
Subscribe to this podcast for free on the Go Loud app.
Born from our expertise in Formula One, Renault E-Tech technology now features in our range of everyday hybrid and electric cars. Discover the #1 selling electric vehicle range in Ireland with finance from 0% APR, €1,000 green bonus and 3 months deferred payments. See why we are the #1 electric vehicle manufacturer in Ireland. Visit your local Renault dealer today. Offer is made under a hire purchase agreement. Deposit required subject to lending criteria. Terms and conditions apply. See Renault.ie.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
Right now at Power City, claim up to €110 cashback when you purchase a selected Samsung Galaxy Book. To find out more, go online to powercity.ie or call in store today.
The summer sale is now on in all Brown Thomas and BT2 stores and online, with up to 50% off your favourite brands. Brown Thomas Summer Sale, the one you've been waiting for.
A year of swimming pools closed and swimming lessons cancelled. It's National Water Safety Awareness Week. Mark it by giving water safety the focus we all give COVID. Near home or on staycation, swim between the flags at lifeguarded waterways. Supervise children and never use inflatables on open water. Wear a life jacket, boating or angling. This is Water Safety Ireland. Get the advice you need at watersafety.ie. Better safe than sorry. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
The country is on the way to reopening, but the world and our roads have changed since we were last out here. There are now more of us cycling and more of us walking, and there are more reasons to look out for each other. Drivers, please slow down and take care when passing pedestrians and cyclists. Pedestrians, always walk on the footpath. If there isn't one, on the right-hand side of the road facing oncoming traffic. We're on the road back. Make it a safer one. A message from the Road Safety Authority and An Garda Síochána.
Believe in a summer to savour with great offers at your local Super Value, like Super Value Fresh Irish Lamb Leg, now save 33%. Super Value 7 fruit and veg like cucumbers and tomatoes, just 49 cents each. Choose from our huge range of barbecue meats, any 3 for €10. And Super Value ice cream cones 4-pack, $1.19 each. Super Value, real food, real people.
With Virgin Mobile, there's nothing hidden. Now you can try unlimited data, calls and texts for only €5 a month for 5 months for everyone joining. It's an offer that's bigger than big. So, what are you waiting for? See virginmobile.ie. Virgin Mobile. Nothing hidden.
SIM-only contract. For T's and C's and acceptable usage policy, see virginmobile.ie. €25 a month after offer. Ends 28th of July 2021.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
You are welcome back to the Sunday Paper Review here on Off the Ball. John Duggan sitting in for Joe Malloy until 7. You can watch us on the digital and social channels for Off the Ball, as well as listening on News Talk. So check out Periscope for Twitter at Off the Ball, YouTube, Facebook and on the OTB Sports app. We're continuing our chat, going through the best of the stories in the Sunday Papers with the Virgin Media commentator Dave McIntyre and the broadcaster and accredited sports psychologist Máire Treasa. 53106 if you want to get involved in the conversation. Part 2 of Jim Bulger and Paul Kimmage is in the Sunday Independent. What was the assessment, Dave?
I think I've definitely found it interesting, and last weekend's first part was very interesting, and there was more maybe juicy aspects to the first portion of it, but today it's really more of a chat. I wouldn't know the ins and outs of the racing game as much as you would, JD, and the significance of Jim Bulger as a figure in Irish racing, because I'm sure no matter how I tried to describe it, I would underplay it. But I did pick out a couple of pieces in it. I mean, the first portion of today's section is essentially a piece debunking some of the myths around Jim as an almost tyrannical figure around his yard, and there's a couple of pieces where something is put to him that allegedly took place in the past, and he has maybe told the right side of the story. But there's a quote from AP McCoy after falling off the gallops on one of Bulger's horses and breaking his leg. And if you were to read the piece in isolation in AP McCoy's book, Jim Bulger stood over him as McCoy was laying prone on the ground with a broken bone and told him that you're soft, which makes Jim Bulger sound like an incredibly difficult person to be around. Only that wasn't really how it went down. He actually said it to him after Tony McCoy had gone out of hospital and had put on a little bit of weight. So he was a bit pudgier than he might have been maybe before he initially went in for his treatment. But McCoy has said that if any young fella asked, where he should go if he's to cut his teeth in the racing game, that he should go to Jim Bolger's yard. And if he had his time again, Tony McCoy would do exactly what he did and spend the time with Jim Bolger that he did. But the one part I kind of wanted to run by you, John, was there's a really interesting back and forth between Kimmage and Bolger about Aidan O'Brien, and people in the racing game will know the amount of time that Aidan O'Brien spent working under and with Jim Bolger and how much he would have learned in Jim's yard. And there's a couple of references to Aidan O'Brien, but one is that I thought there was a real dig at O'Brien, where Bolger said he would like to see him learn enough to be able to select one horse for the big race on the big day and get it right. And that is something he has not learned yet. And I'm just wondering, given your love for the sport, what your thoughts are on that. Is that an unfair thing to say about Aidan O'Brien, or do the circumstances dictate that O'Brien will never be in that position? Given how successful he is, he will never go into a Grade 1 race with just one horse to choose from. There will always be multiple horses.
Doesn't need to learn to do it, be my view, because this is all about business, and flat racing in Ireland is all about primarily breeding. Therefore, the most important thing to do is win big races like the Epsom Derby. A horse called Serpentine won the Epsom Derby last year, 25-1. If Serpentine, who was not a fancied horse, becomes one of the best ever colts at producing horses that go on and win future races around the world, it is more important for Aidan O'Brien to have many chances to win a Derby than have one chance and to prove that he's a great trainer. And early in his career, he would have had really like leading hopes for a Derby, but he could have had a pacemaker in the race. So Galileo won the Derby in 2001, and Galileo has become probably the supreme colt. You're making hundreds of thousands from a cover for a young stallion that'll go on and out of Galileo. So it's a massive business, and I feel that it doesn't really matter. And I think it's actually better for Aidan O'Brien to have many darts at the board than have just one chance. And that's why he's won 8 Epsom Derbies, more than Vincent O'Brien ever won. So it's really immaterial about that.
What would your thoughts be on, and it's touched upon in Paul Kimmage's piece, and the relationship between Jim Bolger and Aidan O'Brien, and Jim Bolger himself describes it as maybe somebody else eating your dinner or taking your dinner, given that he had such an influence on Aidan O'Brien's development. And then in the last maybe 15, 20 years, he sat back and he has watched the Aidan O'Brien phenomenon just go from strength to strength. It's an almost overwhelming, overpowering presence in the flat game at the moment that one wonders what Jim Bolger makes of how much progress Aidan O'Brien has made.
I would say he's happy for Aidan. I don't know the gentleman that well. I would say that when Vincent retired, there was going to be an heir to the Baddies Oil operation, which is Vincent's son-in-law, John Magnier, Coolmore, that massive global business, which this is. The horse racing is almost secondary at times to it. Aidan O'Brien was young, he was hungry, he'd proven himself as a jumps trainer, and therefore he was the person that they anointed as the successor, and he's proven that by winning races around the world, Breeders' Cup, Derbies. The most important race is still the Epsom Derby. It was interesting in the article that Jim said, I did feel I should have got more support from him. This is Aidan O'Brien on the issue of drugs and racing, when I said we didn't have a level playing pitch. That was an interesting comment for Jim to make. I thought it was probably the biggest comment in the article.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was the most telling, really, comment in the whole piece. And I suppose this is us pulling out, taking our own perceptions of what that may or may not mean, I suppose, you know. But yeah, that stood out for me. And perhaps for him, he may have felt that when he made that comment last week that he would have started a ball rolling.
Not going to happen.
He may feel it's instead a tumbleweed. And he may have felt that perhaps other people may have jumped onto the ball, which of course they're right not to. But yeah, I think visibly, obviously, he was very disappointed. Well,
Jim is one of the most respected people in the game. So you have to take what he says very seriously, as Ger Lyon said on the show last week. But the IHRB have said they've got zero tolerance for doping. They say they have 5,000 tests a year. They say they have testing after every winner. It's almost like they're the police, and the question is, are the police doing their job? They say they're doing their job, but what Jim says needs to be taken very seriously, and you'd hope that whatever investigations or ramping up of testing around doping needs to be done, will be done. Because unfortunately, or fortunately, unless you've got proof, unless you've got evidence, clearly there's not much that can be done right now. and it's whether the evidence will come to case. We have had cases in the past. Philip Fenton was banned for being in possession of steroids. But it was a flare, as Ruby Walsh wrote about this week, that was put into the sky by Jim, and I think there's definitely legs in the story.
It'll be interesting to see in a few years' time, like you said, using that flare metaphor, and a few years' time perhaps, and there's more investigations, and like you said, we'll call them the de facto police force. They are upping their testing, and they're saying they are as robust as they can be, and they're planning to be even more robust. It'll be interesting to see what will be seen, if anything, in a few years' time, and will this have been seen as a moment where people should have moved faster, or will it be seen as actually everyone was doing the best they could at the time? We don't know this yet. But unfortunately, in the world of professional sport, in all different sports, not just equestrian or horse racing, all over the world, we saw it during the week with Shelby Houlihan is all over in the US, and the athletics and the ban she got for having too much nandrolone in her system. When there's money and power at stake, you always have to, you would be naive to think that stuff was not going on that shouldn't be going on in all sports.
Well, I love Irish racing. I think Irish racing is something we'd be very proud of, and I've been following it for 30 years as a punter and as a fan and as a journalist at times. I would say it would be naive to believe there's not shenanigans going on in Irish racing, just as much as you'd be naive to believe there's not shenanigans going on in cycling and athletics. Are most of the people involved of the utmost integrity? I would say yes, but it would be naive to believe that 100% of them are straight.
Agreed.
David, I don't know if you want to add or talk about Rory McIlroy or something instead.
Yeah, I'm not educated enough in the matters of horse racing to really delve into something as potentially incendiary as this, but it's been summed up by Máire Treasa there, where there's money and power at stake, albeit in any sport. And there are a number of sports out there, I think, that either have in the past or are still currently doing so, turning a blind eye or not wishing to really delve deep into the potential issues. And until that changes, there'll be a large number of sports that maybe are lacking in the integrity that they could do if you are absolutely confident in the structures that are in place, which unfortunately isn't the case in a lot of places. But I know we're into the last few minutes of our pay-per-view today, and the golf is something that I'm actually debating in my mind during our ad breaks in this hour as to whether or not I've got the wherewithal to stay up for it tonight.
You will, Dave, you will.
I think the days of me managing to last the duration of a West Coast major are gone, unfortunately. I remember Graham McDowell winning at Pebble Beach in 2010 as probably being the last time I managed to hang around long enough to watch somebody who lift whatever trophy was in question, in this case the US Open trophy. 11 years ago, I didn't manage to watch Webb Simpson win an Olympic the year after that, or was it 2 years after that? Will I manage to get in there tonight? I know Rory tees off at 8:44, so he's probably not going to be finished until about 2 in the morning. It's going to be a very difficult one. If he's still in the mix around about 11:30, it's going to be very difficult to say no and to go to bed when you know you could be potentially watching Rory win for the first time in 7 years. And yesterday his round of golf was almost error-free in comparison to his first 2 days, where he was making very few pars. His rounds were littered with birdies and bogeys. So I just did a really quick count there during our last break. I'll make it 8 major champions are within 5 shots of the lead. It is beautifully set up, absolutely beautifully set up.
Yeah, I can't wait for it myself. And Lohan Maguire as well, we can't forget, on the verge potentially of a career breakthrough and a LPGA Tour win. I thought Luke Fitzgerald's piece was quite funny in the Sunday Times about the Lions, Máire Treasa.
Oh yeah, it was a brilliant piece actually. It's all about him kind of talking about his experiences, and you get little stories from outside the rugby field as well, and you'd actually kind of forget he had such. It was good for me to get the reminder myself that his rugby playing days, while he ended with injury and he was always plagued with injury, when he began it came really easy to him. And he made his Ireland debut at 19, and that's really interesting. And two seasons later, he barely missed a minute of a Grand Slam campaign. And then all of a sudden, we know how his career ended. He was plagued. But I thought this was really interesting. He was talking about how he was so focused on his game. He wanted to play so well. Not a hair was out of place. Everything was meticulously planned. And then he arrives in Pretoria, and they're getting their rooming lists. And he's roomed with Andy Powell. And he says his heart sank And I have to read this out word for word because I couldn't do it justice by paraphrasing. I loved Andy, he says. He was a great trainer and great fun. But he was also leading the charge on nights out and didn't look like a test option at that point. I'm thinking, I need a few good kips here and to train well. Powley's on a different schedule. Let's see how the first night goes. I remember waking up the next morning and the first thing I see is a pizza stuck to the ceiling above me. I turn over on my side and just imagine the vision and see this orange 120 kg lump splayed on the bed opposite. The Welsh guys are wearing their Saint-Tropez fake tan at this stage, so you had this massive orange body with a white arse. Not the greatest sight. Still, at least he hadn't woken me, which I find miraculous in itself. How deep does Luke Fitzgerald sleep? I want to know the answer to this. But then I go to brush my teeth and I crunch into all these Cheetos between the beds all over the carpet. That's when I decided to request a room change, and he was good about it.
It's interesting, John.
Luke Fitzgerald sleep.
He also talks about that second test in Pretoria in 2009.
Shockburger, yeah, bloody hell.
Like it's seen as one of the most physical tests in modern professional rugby. And there's a line from Peter O'Reilly, who has sat down with Luke to talk about this period in his life in the build-up to obviously the Lions test series starting in the next couple of weeks. But a referee apparently recently reviewed that second test between the Lions and the Springboks, who were then world champions as they are now, and he said he'd have shown 3 red cards and 14 yellows. We remember that tackle that Brian O'Driscoll put in on Danny Russo, and it was seen as a heroic tackle at the time, but it's completely outlawed now. And O'Driscoll would absolutely have been sent off for that tackle if it was refereed according to modern day standards. Schalkberger shown a yellow card for an eye gouge, which was picked up by the touch judge at the time. Now, under the rules, the TMO didn't have the leeway to intervene in foul play as he or she does now. But so it was still, there would have been enough evidence there for the referee to make the decision himself to send off Schalkberger. They probably would have lost that test, the Springboks, and we wouldn't have got to the situation where we know Ronan O'Gara, having taken a bang to the head a couple of minutes previous, stuck that up and under and chased it on his own and ended up taking out the catcher in the air, which led to that long-range penalty that meant the series was dead and dusted before the third test. And Fitzgerald was really good on O'Gara as well, and the manner in which he was blamed for that defeat. He cites the fact that nobody chased with him. He cites the fact that there was a couple of really soft tries given up by the Lions that afternoon as well, long before O'Gara's mistake. And it's a really interesting read. He still talks about how the referee bottled that decision on Berger. And he also talks about his own career, and he seems comfortable enough to be able to describe how disappointed he still feels with how his career ended. We know it ended at the age of 28 due to injury. He managed to cram an awful lot in for a guy that spent so much time on the treatment table and won some huge games, played in some massive occasions and won big medals, a Grand Slam, a couple of Heineken Cups, went on a Lions tour. But now that he's into his 30s and still 2 years younger than Alan Wynne-Jones, for example, and he's been retired for so long at this stage, it must be difficult for players like himself and Owen O'Malley and other players that have had their careers cut short in their 20s, even when they can take a step back and 5 or 6 or 10 years later look back on it, still not to feel that deep, almost resentment and bitterness and sense of disappointment that maybe he didn't get the breaks that other players did. And someone like Brian O'Driscoll, who got to go out in his mid-30s on a high, with Ireland having won a Six Nations medal. But I mean, those fairy tale endings are so rare, and it's very difficult to end your career in the way that you'd like.
About a minute left. Anything else just to point people to off air, Máire Treasa?
If you are into the Lions and if you love pointless stats and numbers, do go to the Mail on Sunday. They have a great article by Nick Simon talking about facts and figures of keeping a Lions tour on tour. And the headline is, just to whet your appetite, literally, 8,000 eggs, 2,000 chicken fillets, 7,000 steaks and Love Island. The secrets to keeping 37 Lions fit to take on the Box.
Well, Rory McIlroy's had the same chicken sandwich 6 days in a row. Dave, briefly from yourself?
Yeah, interesting if you have the time to read Stuart Barnes on the Sunday Times today, because he is talking about the United Rugby Championship and the details of which were confirmed during the week, and the chatter around potential inclusion of South Africa in the Six Nations and maybe somewhere down the line, and this may be just a prelude to that, and how he feels that is going to affect the Celtic League as it stands, Pro 14 rugby as it stands, and a future Six Nations as well. Stuart Barnes doesn't think that we're going down the right road.
Dave McIntyre, Máire Treasa, Kelly, an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Ramagi.
Thank you.
Sunday paper review, brilliant stuff from Dave and Máire Treasa. Off the ball Sunday, on News Talk, getting the days mixed up here. We're back with Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran for the football pod after the news at 3.